today I tested a new plugin and it's called Liquid Death Snare. So this video is going to be about this plugin, and the beat is sounding like this. So these are three parts which have basically no transition between them, so it sounds a bit weird, but it does make sense for this test because we have a part that sounds very empty and relaxed, and one that is really crowded with sounds. The spectral range is sort of very filled up, and one that is kind of medium. So let's go to the simple part now and let's check out what I did with Liquid Death Snare. And yeah, at the moment it sounds like this. So let's actually turn off all the effects here, so they can only hear the plugin. Yeah, let me make a copy of the plugin and deactivate the main plugin so I can mess with the patch a bit in order to show you what you can do. Because normally I don't like plugins that are very heavy in size, and this plugin is definitely one of them. It has, what was it? I think it was 300 MB of samples for all these kinds of snares, but stay with me because I like this plugin because of the interface and the controls. I think it's actually genius, and it really leads it leads the eyes to the parts that make sense. You can kind of read it from left to right and then from left to right again. You will see what I mean right now, because usually you start with the scale, you know? In what scale is the music? So you can, you know, just find a note that fits to some other note of your scale and at the same time creates a nice snare sound. And yeah, all of these settings have been recorded individually, which is a nice extra to have, because that means that there is no frequency shifter doing fancy stuff that could sound unnatural, even though I would say frequency shifters do sound pretty cool. I wouldn't be mad if it was a frequency shifter, but it's still a nice extra, like a frequency shifter. I mean, it sounds a bit unnatural if you go too far, but you can also find nice flavors with a frequency shifter. But this is not a frequency shifter, it's individual samples, which is cool. Now you can map the sounds to different keys on your keyboard, which makes sense if you want to perform this thing. I don't. I always just write stuff into the piano roll, but we can already see which things we have, you know, to choose from here, which is a rim shot and a flam. And multi-velocity. I guess that makes sense if I actually use velocity, which I don't. So as you can see, I made a little rhythm here that just has it on the 2 and on the 4. And at the end there is a little bit of tatak, chlak. So now that you have basically the basics finished, the next question that you can ask yourself is, do I want this to be a round robin thing or a one shot? And round robin probably makes sense in the context of more natural sounding music, where the rest of the kit also has round robin-ish properties to it. But I'm personally more of a one-shot guy because I make electronic music and I'm not so much about making everything humanized all the time. So I just select the one shot and it has the same sample every time. But I can deselect it now for you to listen. So you can hear it's a bit of a tighter sound now if you don't deselect it. Then you have a bunch of different mics to choose from that all have an individual sound character and you can mix them. You can listen to them now. A very punchy sound. Kind of a thin sound but nice rattle. Kind of a fat sound but not with a lot of low mids. A bit of a boxy sound, also very roomy and more low mids. A very wide sound. A kind of a muffled sound. And a far away microphone. Now I have one problem with these controls, which is that they don't have an option for me to change the phase, especially going backwards in time. And I know that doesn't make sense from a performer perspective, and you know, this thing is definitely made for performing because it has this part of the UI, but it should also be made for studio work in my opinion, which would mean that you can put a minus delay, a negative delay on all of these things. And that and the use case for that becomes especially apparent when you compare the top and the far microphone, because the top one has a very instantaneous sound and the far one it's a microphone that was placed like at the other side of the room or something. So naturally the sound comes a little bit later to the ear. And now in case like this, it would make sense to just say, okay, I give it a bit of negative delay so that, you know, the most full part of the snare comes in time with the other mics. And if I could do that with all of the mics now, then it would probably create a very fat sound. Now you can make a sound and it might not be the fattest sound that you could possibly do with the samples because of the delay thing, but you can at least flip the phase and just see how that sounds. Now, of course they can make a little bit of a difference, but the samples, they have already been chosen to have sort of a nice phase alignment with each other, or I mean polarity, not phase, but still sometimes it can just help in the context of a mix to tweak that a little bit. And yeah, you can put that to different output channels if you want to, but I don't. I just put it all to one channel because I know that I have to post-process this entire thing anyway, so why not just put it into the same channel, I think, and then do the stuff. Is this also a polarity flip of the entire thing? Yes, it is. Yeah, so that would be useful if you want to layer that with even more snare samples. And that's already it, as you can see. So we have read this interface from left to right, and when we reach the master out knob, then we have created a sound that makes sense. And then we can use that sound. Now I removed this instance again and used the instance that I tweaked to this mix again, and I just show you what I did to further tweak the sound. So the first thing that I did was instantiating Pro MB in expansion mode, downwards in expansion, turning up the ratio completely, turning down knee completely, and a bit of look ahead. Because if you didn't use look ahead with an expander, then you would lose the transient. So you dial in look ahead to get the transient back. And the more you dial in look ahead, the more you can also dial in attack, which helps with making the transition between the effect working and not working a bit smoother, and that can reduce the amount of distortion that it introduces. And then the release time is the most interesting parameter for the sound. Actually, why? No, I don't want to see herps. The release time is the most interesting sound parameter, currently on 38%. But when I'm tweaking it now, you can hear that it really shapes how long the sound should sound. So I put it on 38 because that is sort of a transitional value between a sound that is very short but kind of unnatural and a sound that is natural but kind of loose. So I have a more tightened up sound now with this little trick. Then I have this FX layer, which is parallel processing in Bitwig. And there I have a layer that is just completely dry. It's just a dry signal. And a layer with a bandpass filter, which is a technique that I learned in a video by Dan Worrell. So the bandpass filter is exactly on the frequency of the fundamental frequency of the snare, and you can hear it just pumping a little bit. And then I'm also going with that into a saturator to give it a bit more harmonics. Which then mixed with a dry signal sounds nice. The reason why that sounds nice is because if you turn up the Q factor of a bandpass filter, then it starts to resonate and it makes the sound a little bit longer. So in the context of the fundamental frequency of a snare, that just makes the snare sound a little bit more voluminous. And one thing I want to say here though, Dan Worrell in his video, he said that he uses zero latency mode for that, because then he doesn't have pre-ringing. It does sound good like that, but I actually use linear phase with low latency on purpose to get the pre-ringing, because I like the sound when the snare sort of a bit introduces itself in the low end before really hitting. Do you hear that? It sounds like boom, boom, boom instead of just boom, boom, and I think that's pretty cool. In his video, he also explored that setting, but said he made it seem like it's kind of a nonsense setting, but I actually like that setting. Now I put a saturator behind just to round off this whole parallel processing sound, make it glued together, stuff like that. And then Enveloper, which is a MIDI triggered gate. I made a different video about that. You can find that. I will not put a link because I just want to upload this video and call it a day for today, and not edit around it a lot. But this is a MIDI triggered gate, and it basically just says, for as long as this MIDI node plays, we let the sound through, and after that it releases. Now that further shapes the dynamics of the sound, and it kind of adds a bit more of the things that I already started with the multiband expander. So how good does the sound of the snare work in the mix? Let's listen to the mix again. So in this quieter part, it does come through a little bit that I was processing the snare very hard with the expander and enveloper. See, I just made an automation to combat that. So I dialed in a little bit more bottom, which is the dry signal, so to say, to just give it a bit more of a natural flavor in this, quieter or more relaxed part. And then when it goes to the part that is already crowded, then the body of the snare backs off and makes space for the other stuff. Actually, I just dialed that back a little bit because it does sound cool when the body rings out a bit. Now for this. Oh, actually, that sounded pretty cool with a very unnatural and tight setting. So yeah, that's how I would use this plugin. And I've seen someone ask, what is a plugin like that good for? Because it's sort of like a real snare, but then it's used in the context of different drum sounds. And usually when you have real snares, they come with plugins that also handle all the other parts of the drum set, so that it's, you know, a consistent sort of kit. And my workflow is just rarely like that. I always make different instances for snare, kick, and other parts of drums. And they can come from completely different types of synthesizers or samplers, or even just samples that I imported. And I mix them together as I want. And in this case, I have this combination, a snare by Liquid Death Snare. And the kick with Chowkick, and a ride cymbal, which is just a sample of a ride cymbal. Well, I could go through the settings a little bit, but I just want to say first that this sort of makes sense. You know, you have a sample of a ride cymbal, and it's actually a natural ride sample, kind of old but still natural. And I massively crushed it with the saturator, and I made sure that stuff doesn't go above the length of the MIDI notes. And I layered that with a kick that is just completely synthetic. It's just Chowkick, and if you know me a bit, then you know that I love this plugin because it lets you craft kicks. Lately, someone gave me a comment on my initial Chowkick video saying they are not able to make a sound with it that actually makes them happy. So let me just show you how this particular patch sounds with the rest of the drums. Now that might explain to you why you are not happy, because this is not processed now and it just cannot get to the same level of complexity and juiciness as the rest of the sounds. Still, I think that is just a great foundation to make snares, because I can already hear the clickiness and the low end, and all I have to do is just adding a lot of effects to make that very nice. And the first effect that I added was disperser, because then you already have this round transition between the transient and the body, and it also extends the length of the kick. And always when I do that, I immediately follow it off with Enveloper, because disperser makes the sample sound really long, especially in the low end, and then you don't have space for the bass line anymore, which would suck a bit. So Enveloper, and then Saturator by Bitwig, just to add a bit of harmonics and also to round off the transient a bit, so that it feels more glued to the body as well. And then a bit crusher. Well, that is an unusual setting for a bit crusher. You can hear the clock time a little bit. It adds this aliasing feel to the transient, but a lot of the stuff I don't even understand what exactly all this does, but it sort of adds a bit of fatness in this particular example. I rarely use jitter or chance because I am not so much into randomness when it comes to kicks, and even with when these are turned off and on completely, it still sounds a bit random what's happening, which is sad. I wish that wasn't the case, but it's unrandom enough for me to use this. And then I follow it off with another saturator to just glue what I did last time together as well. Now the what makes this instance of saturator special, in my opinion, is that I'm actually using the left side of the thing that changes the transfer curve, which is like an expander as well, but it's not a compression expander, but just a wave shaper expander. And that has the interesting effect of adding crunch to the sound. Well, and if I was now to actually, it's called Signalizer, look at the sound that I created. Then I can see that I already made a very complex shape, and it's not just a little synthesizer that outputs its impulse run through a filter anymore, but it's just a complex kick that really has its own flavor and sounds proper. So that is my answer to the person who said that Chowkick is not something they resonate with a lot. And that doesn't mean that it has to resonate with you now, because I mean, it's just preference, I guess, and kicks and snares and stuff. There are things where people can really divide themselves from each other. So I don't know, just do what makes you feel good. Chowkick makes me feel good, and liquid Death Snare makes me feel good as well. Well, except for how big it is, because I don't have a lot of space on my hard drive. I want to build a new computer at the moment, but I still have to fight with the resources of this computer, and every time I have to install a plugin that is not very essential, and it has lots of hundreds of megabytes, I immediately think, okay, someday there will be this moment where my hard drive is full, and then I will open TreeSize3, and then TreeSize3 will tell me, hey, look at your VST folder, there is some stuff in there that is really big, and there are also your personal data things. What of these do you want to delete? And I will be like, will I delete my personal data, or will I delete the plugin that I use only sometimes? You know? So I'm just saying that because some people were very surprised when I told them that I'm not so much into big plugins. Well, that's the reason. And I think when a plugin developer can get away with making much smaller plugins that still help the process of getting inspired and finishing tracks, then that's better for me. But still, something like that just needs to be big. We have multiple mics, we have multiple pitches, so that just adds so many dimensions to this sample library, this underlying sample library, and multi-velocity as well. I'm not using all of that, and I'm not using the round robins, I'm not using the velocity, but even just these two dimensions would already make it very big. So I guess there was no way to make that better. And I'm also not the only user who wants to use this, so some people might use these features. So it's it wasn't possible to make this even better, I guess. But you know, what I find most impressive about this thing is really the UI UX that really leads your way through the plugin. Not in a simple signal chainy way, but you know, just in a way that makes sense conceptually with the concept of snares, and that's just very masterfully done in this plugin. So